morning. Thank you for all of you who made it here today. My name is Hafsa Maalim. I work with the African Union. And in this particular conference, I'm also part of the contributors to the Environment for Peace project. This morning, we will have a very lovely 30-minute conversation with Margot, who has worn many hats in her life. But today, we want to understand her particular role as the chair of the international panel on the Environment for Peace initiative. So Margot, thank you for taking time to join us this morning and allow us to pick your brains as much as possible.
Thank you very much, Hafsa, and good morning to everybody.
Good morning. So I think just to kick us off right from the onset, I did indicate that you are the chair of the international panel for the Environment for Peace initiative. Let's start from there. Why the Environment for Peace? What was the most passionate thing that drove you to be a part of this initiative?
Well, first of all, I think we should give credit where credit is due, and that is really to, of course, Dan Smith as very much the initiator of this project, and also to Claire and as our project leader, and all our experts and staff at SIPRI who has done sort of the everyday work. We have met regularly in this international panel to give hopefully some advice, and we've had the pleasure of working with people like Helen Clark that you listened to yesterday, and also Johan Rockström and Bayun, and we have had people from all over the world, and I think that has been, I hope it has been helpful, because we have seen it from different perspectives, and hopefully been able to steer it a bit, and also say what we thought was missing, or where we would have the project more developed. For me, it really follows a pattern. If I reflect on your question, in a pattern in my life, because more than 30 years ago, I read a book. I was then already in politics. I was a young member of the Swedish Parliament, and I read a book, Morroa Mon Amour, and that was about the French nuclear bomb tests in the Pacific and in French Polynesia. And I was totally blown away by this book. And I got almost obsessed. You know, I was thinking, this cannot be right, that they make those, conduct those tests in a small atoll in the middle of the Pacific, and also the consequences, the effects of these tests. So that gave me a sort of a track to follow. And since then, I have engaged a lot against nuclear weapons, and also, of course, the bomb tests. And so the whole matter of peace and disarmament is a theme throughout my political engagement, and also climate. And here it is kind of the environmental policies ended up a little bit in the shadow of climate change. Since I also worked as an environment commissioner 20 years ago now, this is something that I feel I have some knowledge about, and also deep engagement for. So this is truly a pattern. But I can also say that the day you get grandchildren, then you start to think also more long term. It's really about their future. So it's as simple as that, really. Maybe I could have started with that.
No, absolutely. No, thank you so much for sharing that. And I think it's important for us to have you walk us through your career and what drove you from the time you're a young parliamentarian until where you are today, and why this discussion on environment and security and sustaining the discussion is very important. So I think that was a good insight. But I think also on behalf of the EP team, I would say thank you, because you did ask. I hope it was useful. Your contribution and the international panel discussions and contributions were more than useful and guided the conversation as much as it were. But that takes me to my next question to you. when the Environment for Peace report was being put together and the entire initiative and discussion was ongoing, the rhetoric from the panel, the conversation from the panel was this needs not be another report for the purpose of a report. So what do you think the Environment for Peace report brings that is unique to the table? What is new in it? What would you highlight as the main takeaways for people, if I were to put it as such?
I think the takeaway is that we do have the knowledge we need. We do have the expertise, but we also have the examples. We have all of these cases where it has been tried out, where they have managed to both identify this problem of how environmental challenges and problems lead to social unrest, which can lead to conflict and ultimately war. And where they have looked at ways to prevent that and to plan. And I think slowly the realization of the lack of drinking water and the problems with food will, of course, affect people everywhere. And I think also that the war in Ukraine actually demonstrates how interlinked we are and interdependent we are. And also that we have to have a totally different kind of preparedness and resilience and build resilience. So I think that to establish those links, to explain them, but also give the examples, I hope that will be very helpful. And I have an idea about what we should do next as well.
So actually that was going to be my next question, so I'm glad that we're on the same page. What should we do next? The report is here, it has been launched, we've had fantastic conversations around it. What next? What should come next?
If it looks as if I'm crying, it's pollen allergy. So, well, I truly believe that we need a number of pilot countries that embrace this report, says that we are interested in doing everything we can to follow these recommendations, to let those principles that we have set out guide us, and with some help and maybe both advisors and I guess some money is needed to convince those countries, then we would be willing to see if we can truly implement these ideas. And let's see if we can find a few countries geographically spread around the planet and really turn it into reality, because I mean it's of no help if it just ends up gaining dust on a shelf somewhere. And the shelf life of these reports, I know from working for the UN, is very short. You know, it's they live for a couple of years maybe, and then they're forgotten. So let's make sure that we can implement it instead and find those countries. And there are amazing examples like Costa Rica. I'm sure you've heard about Costa Rica, who has changed sort of their whole, I don't know if this is the constitution as well, I think so, the whole policy in that country, and has become a true example of what you can do to protect the environment, and at the same time you build a better foundation for long-lasting peace, definitely.
No, thank you. And I'm glad that you did mention Costa Rica, and perhaps maybe just picking it from there. Out of the many recommendations the report provides, I mean, in addition to trying to identify pilot, countries to test it, of course, I'm glad you mentioned money. It's important. I think the conversation right from yesterday, discussing this report, one of the things that, the main things that was coming out is we spend so much money reacting to things. Yeah. And we don't get the solutions right because the reaction is also, it's not static, it keeps moving, and therefore we have to keep recurating and sort of reconstructing the responses. So preventing it is cheaper, it's better, and that is the message I understand from you that the Environment for Peace sort of anchors itself on. So out of those many recommendations, in addition to that, what would you point as the main, perhaps, or one or two, top recommendations that you could direct towards, especially, I would say, multilateral organizations, the UN, for example, as you gave an example, you pointed out?
Well, I think of the ups that I mentioned yesterday, I think it is link up, that is cooperation, to cooperate with your neighbors, all those that you will find downstream of that river that you share, if that is sort of one of the main environmental problems you have with water, then look at that. But also pay up, because I really think that we need countries now to pay up to the funds that will be used to adapt and mitigate the effects of climate change, because this is not happening right now. But you can see how easy it is to find money to invest in the military, without any discussion. They are just doing it, governments all over the world. So much money being spent on the military budgets, and we need more to fight the crisis that we see. So I think that those two things will change things around if we start to cooperate across borders, and also sort of make sure that we have the resources to start to adapt, because now it's more a matter of adapting than to mitigate climate change, unfortunately. We are in such a serious... But maybe also for you to see what can the African Union do? How can we make sure that sort of the African countries as well fully understand what we are aiming at? And I hope that we can get a spread of the report also with the African Union, because I must say the African Union has a long-term thinking. It's a plan until 2063. So, I mean, that's amazing. Very few other organizations are willing to plan for and think that long-term. But this is exactly what is needed. So you start to change the perspective, and again, that is when our grandchildren will be midlife. So
no, I mean, absolutely, you're right. I mean, the normative frameworks of the African Union, for example, very long term, and that in itself is an advantage. But to a certain extent, and I think this is one of the things that the Environment for Peace report brings out, is while we are planning longer term, there are also immediate risks that need urgent attention, that need sort of some response right now.
Right.
And so it's important that we find a balance between this longer term planning and responding to the immediate challenges that are coming out. And I think this is very much captured in the Environment for Peace reports, looking at the engagement from the UN side, the African Union, but also, NATO as well, and the OSCE and the rest. So I mean, I find it, it's interesting that you've pointed out the amount of expenses and time and effort that we put into military expenditure. And this is also another thing that is coming out from the report, is to say it's not necessarily useful. We need to think about diversifying and think about future generations, and not just creating an environment that is responsive. But that also takes me to my next question for you. The phrase in itself, environment for peace, is quite interesting. It's a pun, as it were. Trying to create an environment in relation to the actual word, the environment as it is, but also an environment, i.e. enabling a system that is able to foster peace, but is also, that you can be able to derive peace from. And so based on that, of course, is what you said, talking about nuclear energy and all the discussion that you've had around disarmament and the environment. And so my question to you, based on that, the environment for peace and the nuances around it, we're heading into a very important conversation in the next couple of days, Stockholm 50+. How do you see the outcomes of this report feeding into that conversation? Or what would you like to see reflected in that, in the Stockholm 50+ conversation, based on the discussions that we've had today and the next couple of days on this environment for peace report?
Well, I've often been called an idealist or even activist, and that I was an activist also as foreign minister. But I am a very practical person, because I do believe that a report of this kind and the ideas building the report they have to have a practical outcome, because what is it that creates tensions that can lead to, as we said, demonstrations, social unrest and all of that? Well, it's very often because there is a fight over resources, natural resources, and of course sometimes power or religions or what have you. But very often it starts with something that is that has a practical outcome. And I think that those are also the best examples of how do you then plan to sort out the tensions between herders and farmers, for example, in the Sahel area or elsewhere. And maybe this is also what actually even armed groups can gather around a solution for very, very practical and everyday problems that they see. And that has been tested before when it comes to peace agreements around the world. Start in the small things and then build from there and see what are your concerns and your complaints and on the other side, and let's see if we can find a way to start to sort it out. So, but of course it is also I think Jan put it very well yesterday. I think we also today have to fight for democracy, for humanity, for the very basic ideas of how we look at the world and each other and our life together on this planet. And we have to understand also how dependent we are on actually biodiversity. So without the bees we cannot survive, and if we don't understand sort of the whole life cycle of water, then we are become very, very poor, actually. We become poorer.
No, I mean, thank you, Margot. And I think just closely linked to that, if I may, and I'm taking advantage of the fact that you've worn two very important hats. You've worked in a multilateral setting. You've worked in government as well. How do you then see this discussion on trying to take the next steps in terms of the relationship between state actors, multilateral actors, and local actors? You've mentioned very well. You know, how best do you see that relationship? Or how best can it be crafted, rather? I know one of the things, and I'm cheating here a little bit based on our previous conversations with the panel, we keep talking about multilateral all the way to the local or vice versa. But how do you think we should be able to think about the relationship between these three actors, with the aim of trying to foster this environment for peace? How can government, perhaps, if I say, best interact with the local community, as you talked about, sitting here in Sweden, and you're talking about farmer-herder conflict in Sahel? What can that relationship look like?
Well, again, with the principle of nothing about them without them, and if you plan reforms or changes that will affect a certain area, you just have to engage with people and organizations that live there. And I think we will see much more of this, because we even have it here in our country with more of mining extraction and reopening mining activities, and that often clashes with the interests of the Sami people, for example. So how do you engage the Sami people early on in the process to make sure that there is a deeper understanding and that you can sort out those? And I think that this was actually a lesson from working on this project. At least for me, it was clearly a lesson how the importance of this, and to make sure that you plan it and engage people early on in any process. Or any reform that will really change everyday lives for people. So I think that runs also as a red thread throughout the report, to make sure that you consult and that you engage and be deliberately inclusive, as we say. So a government has to be deliberately inclusive.
Oh, no, thank you. And I think just picking up on the question of inclusivity, I'm also keeping an eye on time. We still do have some time. You know, I like that you mentioned inclusivity. You have been an avid advocate, not just for the environment, but for young people, for women. And I do not want us to finish this conversation without talking about that. The role for young women, so the youth, sorry, and the women. I was listening to Elwad and yourself yesterday exchange, and she did talk about, when we say youth, we are often talking about young men and not necessarily young women as well. Not just from the report, but also from your life. How do you, or what message would you put out there calling on leaders to ensure that this inclusivity is actually not just you know, bringing them to the table after you're done as an after the fact, but to ensure that they're present throughout the engagement?
I guess the main message is step back, because young women are coming from everywhere, and they want to claim sort of their human rights and their legal rights everywhere, and they are right to do so. And I believe that there is so much hope there as well. And I saw it because that also made a very deep impression on me to work on the issue of sexual violence in war and conflict. And that was one of the first things I noticed, that those survivors, they did not want to be identified as victims only, but they wanted to have a role for themselves in their families, in their village, in their country, and in the world. And very often when we came from the UN to talk to them, we were not able to bring so much of sort of real comfort or things or money or redress, but we could say, we will carry your voices back to the Security Council. And very often they said, that's good enough, or that's a first step to make sure that we then can also claim our rights to get reparations and what have you. So I think that you know, often you think, have you ever tried women, to put women there instead of these autocrats? We see too many of those power-hungry men gaining power all over the world. And instead we need more women. And I'm not saying that it should be only women. We need to share the responsibility, but it's going too slow around the world. But there is also so much force and power among a generation of young women now. So I'm hopeful that will change the world, definitely.
I like that message. Step back.
Yes, step
and share
back.
the responsibility.
Look out.
Yeah.
Look
so
up.
It's a very good catchphrase, I think. And thank you so much for that. And I think just in the interest of time, perhaps just to ask you your parting shots. What would you want this audience to take away with them today from the Environment for Peace, and what next?
I hope everybody will go home and think of how important it is that we continue to love nature, that we love our environment, that we take care of the environment, both as individuals and in our families and also in society, to value what we have, but also to maybe go back and think, are we representatives of that country that would be a pilot country for the environment of peace from now on? And I think in big and small issues to reflect about those links and understand that we have to do more and think about the reforms, because all of you here you're powerful voices, strong voices, and engaged in different organizations and in governments around the world. So we can make a change. So look at how can we implement it, where can we start? So that will already have a ripple effect, I'm sure.
Absolutely. No, thank you so much, Margot. Your reflections have been very powerful today. It's been, I think, for me, I would speak for myself, having interacted with you on the panel and working on this report, discussions of inclusivity, making sure that we are making, the right people are on the table right from the onset till the end, and they're able to be part of the, implementation process as well, not just taking away ideas and sort of suggestions and then having them being implemented in a different place. And thank you so much. I think we are, wow, we still have 4 minutes. I really was afraid of running out of time, but we did not run out of time. So maybe I'll throw one more to you. I think a call to the young people out there. We have a number of them who have been a part of this process. So in about 3 minutes, what would be your call to the youth so that we can be able to wrap this conversation up?
I hope they will continue to work with us. I think they have been, and thanks to Carolino, who has led sort of the young advisors that have guided the work in environmental peace. They have been amazing, and we heard, of course, both Ilvar and Jaberia yesterday, and I think they have to continue to push and pull an older generation with them and speak up also on these matters, because not that we leave it to them, that's not the idea, but we have to do it with them, and also it is it's their future that we are planning for today. And then I think we should all just be kind. That could be a last advice.
I like that. Be kind. Simple
kind.
and precise and needed. And I think something that we keep forgetting to do most of the time, right?
Yeah.
Be kind. I think we can be able to stop it there. Thank you so much for joining us. That was a conversation with Margot, who is the chair of the international panel. Thank you so much for taking time to reflect with us this morning.
Thank you,
Really
Hafsa.
appreciate it. Thank you.
It was a pleasure. Thank you.